Welcome to Sip of Cinema, the Oscar-winning show where we do deep dives into cinema and other things also.
So sit back, relax, and drink it all in, because today we're talking about the hot conversation that's been going on in the film world for like the last few months. Of course, that's the strikes, writer strike, Screen Actors Guild strike. But most people are just talking about what's going on right now. And, you know, people are also talking about like the 2007, 2008 strike. But we're also going to kind of deep dive into earlier ones from almost 100 years ago even. But before we dive in, let's talk about the drink that we're accompanying this conversation with.
Yeah. So today we're sipping on a little bit of that good old-fashioned Texas whiskey. Not to dox ourselves, but we are in Texas. Try and find us. And the reason I thought this would be appropriate is just because, while we're talking a little bit about the history of strikes and unions in Hollywood, the ways that that's kind of impacted not only the people there, but also the films. And this is a good old-fashioned dry glass of whiskey. That's what they were drinking back in the day when water was still poisonous. So I thought this would be appropriate, but also it's got a little bit of bite, just like those strikers.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Cheers to that, brother.
Cheers indeed.
All right. So starting at the very beginning, there were like movements and, union-esque kind of groups going around from the beginning of cinema. Really, the earliest documentation, or some of the earliest documentations, around 1913. That's when film making kind of took off a little more from just being like, slideshows and whatnot.
Sure.
But the first actual guilds or unions were founded around 1933. And nowadays we mostly worry about residuals, money, all that stuff in our strikes. That's what they've been doing in this one and the last one too. But back then, people were really worried about just not dying at work.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, you and me both.
You and me, brother.
But work environments for films back then weren't as top notch as they are now. We have a bunch of laws and everything like that now. Safety standards that have to be met. Whereas back then, if you watch like a Buster Keaton movie, Charlie Chaplin, any like slapstick stuff at all, they have literal buildings falling over, and they just hope that they don't get hit by them. Or, if we look at Wizard of Oz, around that time period, you had people dying on set. You had people getting permanent skin conditions on set.
Jesus
from
Christ.
Paint. People were ingesting lead and whatnot. So that's what they were really focusing on during the earlier strikes around the 30s and around then. I know you have a little more info on like the 40s and whatnot.
Yeah, actually. So I was excited to do this deep dive. And one of the things that I found out was, apparently there was a really historic day back in October of 1945 called Bloody Friday or Black Friday, or a couple of other names also apparently. And so it's difficult to talk about this too much because it does not, I'll be honest, share a ton of similarities with what we're experiencing with today's strikes, but it was focused, much like you were saying, on people that necessarily weren't just the actors. They weren't just the writers, but like the set decorators, machinists, even plumbers on the studios, right? Because people, everything was basically just like its own city. Hollywood was like its own city. All the studios were like their own city. They had their own police force and stuff like that. And so for the sake of the people that were essentially the backbone of just making sure that like the place didn't fall apart, they had their own union. And so in early 1940s, what you saw was a strike where a new union was competing against an old one, which I thought was pretty interesting. So there was a pre-established one. It was called the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, and it was going up against the Conference Studio Unions. And something you need to know about the good old-fashioned IATSE, it's a really catchy name, I understand that, was that this was the 40s. This was the height of mobs and like crime organizations, and they had their bloody little fingers in everything. So the head of the IATSE who was supposed to be representing these people, was actually he was a Chicago gangster by the really, I think, ironic name of Willie Byoff. So if you can believe that a man named Byoff took bribes, you got me beat.
Kind of literally sounds word for word like that one scene in The Godfather.
Yeah.
With the horse head and how they had their hand in all that jazz. I don't know. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's comical actually. And this is just a fun little tidbit. It doesn't really. I just thought it was fucking hilarious, to be honest. So this man Byoff was actually the way it worked is that studios funneled him money to try and keep these workers complacent, essentially, to keep things pacing going.
Yeah.
So the union was actually working against what you would typically think of a union working towards today. It was very much keeping people in line and almost like its own form of a union buster. So he took bribes, he took money, and actually in the early 40s, he wound up getting caught for extortion, sent to Alcatraz. And then in, what was this again? Yeah, 1955, after he got out of Alcatraz, he went to Phoenix where he thought he could retire peacefully, only to one day, under a completely new name, by the way, as well, only to one day turn the key in his car and realize that somebody had planted a car bomb.
I don't think you realized. I think it just went off, bro.
It just fucking blew up and he died. And that was actually way after 1945 Bloody Friday, but I could get away from that detail. I thought it was fascinating. I could make like a whole movie about that itself. But the way that Bloody Friday actually broke down was that after approximately, what was it again? Like 29 weeks of striking, the different unions, the different strikes went up against each other and they caught into a clash because members of the IATSE broke the picket line. They were scabbing and they were non-strikers. And that really, well, boy, that rubbed the CSU wrong. So a fight broke out because the members of the CSU that were striking wound up flipping cars over.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, manpower. These were strong motherfuckers.
These are some Eagle fans, bro. Goddamn.
That's what I'm saying. And so they wound up, they flipped over the cars, and then the studio police got involved because, like I mentioned, they had their own police force, right? And so they wound up clashing with each other, where the police force wound up calling all of the LA police because there were hundreds and hundreds of members, I think actually into the low thousands of members that got caught up into this brawl, where police were throwing tear gas canisters, fire hoses, brass knuckles back before they were illegal. And I guess they're illegal now again in Texas. I'm not judging, right? Beer bottles were being thrown and it just turned into like this massive thing. But I think actually the term Bloody Friday is a bit of a misnomer because as it turns out, nobody died, right? Nobody even got seriously injured. 40 people did wind up in the hospital, right? RIP. But
well, I mean, you said it was in the low thousands, right?
Right.
So if only 40 are in the hospital, I mean, that's not bad.
That's pretty good numbers.
Right?
That's pretty good numbers. I don't know. That's just me. Yeah, and it wound up actually shortly after that, they wound up being able to strike a deal. I mean, the kind of the raucous did go on for a few days before that happened, but it was the first situation where this new union that was really representative of the workers' rights came in and were able to strike a deal that was the best for everybody. So they wound up being able to strike a deal later that year. And it worked out. Unfortunately, it did have the side effect of getting the government to be really, really anti-union at the time.
Yeah.
And that began, this is right after World War II, right before the Cold War, you have to understand. That began the idea that unions were just like hubs for communists. And they had to start essentially making acknowledgments, public acknowledgments to the governments that they weren't communists if you were a union. It's really crazy historical story. And I think that it's really interesting because it goes to show, one, that these people who go on strike are like, you don't get into a brawl or strike for over half of a year unless it really matters to you. Like this is for the sake of your life, for your livelihood, and for even safe working conditions. But also, it goes to show kind of historical precedents for just how far studios have been, at least in the past, willing to go to not meet pretty basic demands. So that's my little raucous. That's my little diatribe. I thought that was a fascinating bit of history. and it gets into just basic worker rights before we start getting into the 1960s, where strikes for pay and for things like residuals really started first popping up.
Well, that also kind of started popping in like, I think it was 1953. Because that's when they went on strike because TV was on the up and up.
Yeah.
So of course you had like, now you had TV writers and you had TV directors for like shows and all that. You know, we had the rise of sitcoms, you know, the I Love Lucy's, Dick Van Dyke, all that stuff. So there was a good amount of striking going around then because people were like, okay, well, with a movie, I get my contract, I'm working X amount of days, whatever. But with the show, if I'm doing X amount of episodes versus just one script or like anything like that, the residuals aren't going to work out the same. So in 53, I'm pretty sure it was 53.
Okay.
That's when the first big strike for like TV writers and crew members and all that stuff, actors, kind of rose up. And then after that, we got like the golden age of like sitcoms. So it worked out then, and it encouraged, you know, more heavily in the work in that. I know we want to talk more about film though, but what about the 60s that you were about to say before I interrupted you?
So yeah, to get back to the 1960s, you know, that's really the first time that the formal, what we would think of as the Writers Guild and SAG before it was SAG-AFTRA, really went on strike at the same time. And you were talking about TV. Well, you know, this was the first time that, you know, kind of continuing on that we really saw the birth of something called syndication. And for the listeners at home,
and also for me, please.
Yeah, and for you, and for you, I got you. Syndication is essentially the leasing of media to, realistically, in the sake of TV and film, to cable networks, right? And so studios were getting tons of money from reruns or from movies that previously were just in theaters, were going on to TV. And they were able to reap in a lot of money out of that. But people who were a part of making that movie happen weren't getting any of that revenue split. So really, syndication, you know, led to the realization that residuals needed to be a part of the equation. That's when you see residuals become, you know, a thing in the first place. And what I think is interesting is that while Ronald Reagan was that's right, Ronald Reagan was the president of SAG at the time, and
crazy,
really crazy, and he led to the decision that residuals needed to be a part of the equation. I don't have the breakdowns necessarily on the percentages, but I will say that it led to a fairly successful resolution, right, which was good. Of course, this 21 years later, Ronald Reagan became president, and one of his first actions as president was to bust unions of air traffic controllers, telling them that at the time when they went on strike for just, you know, better wages, same thing we always see people striking for, that they had 48, that they were breaking the law, and that they had 48 hours to get back to work, otherwise they could consider themselves fired. So some good, some bad there, but I think it's interesting because that really sets the stage in my mind for what we see as a trend amongst these strikes, which is studios find a new medium through which they can make money, and they want to cut everybody else out. And that's something that I see kind of trending from every strike from the 1960s on. And certainly what we see now with streaming, but there's certainly been a couple others that have happened since then. I know that in particular, my next you know, strike of note was in the 1980s, and this was pretty much the same thing, right? So the residuals that had been agreed upon in the 1960s during those strikes, while studios had been steadily cutting back on those, and members of these unions were getting pissed off. And fun fact, as soon as the agreement that they had reached its final day, these writers, these actors were already so pissed off that the very next day is when the strike began. So, you know, pretty interesting stuff.
That's quick work.
Yeah. And so over the course of, you know, the previous 20 years, studios had begun to cut back residuals. They'd begun to worsen deals for workers. And so you see them do the same thing where they need to go on strike to try and get their money. People need a working, livable wage.
Mm-hmm.
And while that strike went on for about 22 weeks, and apparently cost the industry anywhere from 500 million to like 800 million, for how I know, which is insane. It's like, just sign the damn deal.
Well, I mean, bro, when you just look at the numbers for this one, not to jump ahead or anything
Yeah.
like that, it's already in the billions, I'm pretty sure.
Oh yeah.
Or at least projected to be by the end of it.
Yeah, you got to get that
So,
Marvel money.
It just makes you wonder, at what point do you just say, I'm screwing myself here
Yeah.
more than I'm already screwing the
Mhm.
workers, but I'm screwing myself here too. Like, when do you just, anyways, I don't mean to jump ahead.
No,
But-
I think that's completely fair. And, I think one thing that's interesting, and this is not necessarily film specific, but about the strikes in the 1980s, is that I think that's the first time where studios did decide to get a little bit creative, because they had a little bit more creative control over what was being put on air. And to fill the dead space in between shows and movies and stuff like that were being shown on TV, they came up with the idea for reality TV.
Mhm.
Thus began the very beginnings of reality TV, which is like Cops,
Yeah.
right? High praise to Cops.
I've watched hundreds of hours of Cops. Let me
Hundreds.
tell you,
At least. Let me tell you, those cops,
they're copping.
they're boy.
Well, I mean, also just in terms of the film world, the 80s is also when we really saw, I mean, the rise of the blockbuster was like Jaws 75 or
Mhm.
whenever it was. But 80s is when like blockbusters really had started to get a chokehold on Hollywood. So I wonder to what extent the mentality of, instead of, because this is when this mentality kind of started really, where instead of having a bunch of movies, they're focusing more on just these big blockbusters to bring in more money, which we've seen just get grossly larger in current times. I wonder how much that had a play in it as well, where they're like, well, we have these big mega projects now. We don't need like as many writers to make, Terminator 2 or to make X movie, whatever. You know?
Again, kind of talking about that trend of, we see a strike bust out from unions, and studios' response is to, essentially let people tire themselves out before they realize that people are not going to get tired of not eating, or being able to afford rent,
or losing their homes. Yeah,
or
exactly.
losing their homes. Yeah. And so they eventually sign a deal, and then what happens? Over the course of the next several years, they slowly start to pull back money that they're actually offering to these people, pull back any restrictions they had in place, and continue to consolidate the workforce. How can we work these people harder and get more creative juices out of them?
Yeah.
And certainly that's happened ever since. And so yeah, I think the next one that I really had that was of note was the most recent before this, which was 2007 and 8. Yeah.
And this one kind of goes hand in hand with what you just said about the one in the 80s kind of being the birth of reality TV. Because 2007, 2008 was, the rise of like, or really the start of the rise of like the Jersey Shore type shows, or like the Bravo shows, things like that. So I think a lot of people credit the 80s strike with being like the spark for reality TV, but they credit 2007, 2008 for being like the real like rise in it. Because you don't have to pay someone to write Jersey Shore.
No.
Keeping Up with the Kardashians.
Believe it or not,
whatever.
it's not pre-scripted.
Yeah.
And they are just like that.
Yeah.
So
but 2007, 2008 was the first time we saw like streaming come into it.
Yeah.
Because mainly they were coming together and saying, yo, if you put this show on X or Y streaming platform, how am I going to get paid residuals?
Yep.
And this is still a big thing that's being spoken about in this current strike as well.
Sure.
Because prior to 2007, 2008, cable was still king. If you have a
Mm.
movie on cable, it's a lot easier to calculate, you know, commercial revenue, households watching, all that stuff. Um, Whereas when you put a show on Netflix or something like that, it's harder. Really, they sign the contract with the streaming platform, and they say, okay, you give us X amount of money, and you keep the show on your platform for Y amount of years.
Yeah.
So it's harder to get residuals from that. Eventually, they came to terms with like an ad revenue based kind of deal, which is the
Hmm.
common thing for everything on the internet, really, YouTube,
Yeah.
whatever. But obviously, as we can see now, they still weren't getting a fair amount. So because we're still here.
Yeah.
Um, a common thing with the 2007 2008 strikes versus the one now that I noticed was early on, the Directors Guild got a deal agreed, and then everyone else was still on strike, and the
Mm.
Directors Guild didn't really do anything. That's the big thing right now, and I don't know if that's because studios want to appease them more,
Mm.
or maybe they're more buddy buddy with the directors, with the executives. Because I mean,
Yeah.
what executives do you really know that?
I don't know any
Well,
executives.
yeah. First of all, well, you don't really see an executive hanging out with a key grip
Sure.
or someone of that kind of role.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's interesting that that's a common theme for the last two strikes. But also something I want to touch up on is when I was looking at articles for that strike specifically, there were a lot of titles such as movies that were ruined by the strike. And I don't know if it's too outlandish for me to say, but I don't think the G.I. Joe sequel was gonna be great to begin with. But like all these lists feature
Well.
movies like G.I. Joe, I think it's Rise of Cobra Kai or whatever it's called.
Yeah. Cobra Kai, different thing.
Different Rise of the Cobra, whatever. Or like the second Transformers movie,
Yeah.
or X-Men Origins Wolverine,
Mm-hmm.
or Angels and Demons, based off of any of the
All
like
classics in their own right,
bro. And maybe you can say that they're all bad because of the strike,
Mm-hmm.
but based off of Da Vinci Code was not that good, bro.
Yeah.
First Transformers, like a classic to some people, but when you break it down, not that good.
Was it really a classic, or did we
Or
just
were we
look
just
at Megan Fox?
or were we just 11 years old, you know? Like but and it was just like this negative mentality that a lot of people had towards the strike, like how dare they, try to earn a living, and now my
Yeah.
movies are ruined.
Yeah.
And
And-
that's, I feel like, something that's like still being pushed today.
It definitely is. It definitely is. And I think that there is a misconception. I do think, and like color me crazy because I guess I'm an adult now and I was an actual literal and legal child back in 2007. But I feel like there is starting to be a little bit more awareness about the fact that fame does not equate to money. And I know that there have been like some of the members of the cast of Orange is the New Black have shared some of their, just like videos of their checks that they got for residuals for being a part of one of the first shows that helped Netflix blow up. It was like House of Cards, and then Orange is the New Black was followed, and like that helped Netflix get its rise to fame. And I've seen some of them go on interviews talking about how they can get stopped maybe 20 times a day, where people want to take pictures with them, and they have like star power. They do have a little bit of star power, even if they're not like like a Kate Hudson or some like big actress. That doesn't change the fact that people recognize them, people love their characters, people connect with how they portrayed their character on screen, and they're still living out of an apartment with no bathtub, or they're not, like, there's a disconnect fundamentally that I think people were really aggressive about in 2007 that I think is slightly better now, but it still needs to be worked on, where people think that just because you won an award, you're set for life, when in reality, some of the stars that you see getting awards on award shows, they rented that suit. You
Yeah.
know, they rented that dress. They can't afford. They're barely making ends meet. They worked forever on a show, and you know they need those residuals to be able to make up the space between this project and the next project to even qualify for life insurance in the first place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not guaranteed that.
Mm-hmm.
And then they yeah, I don't know. I think it is better now, but I do hear where you're coming from, and I think I see that too, especially with like the paparazzi glamour that was happening in around the time of like the mid 2000s as well, where people were just like way more aggressive and less understanding.
I mean, to kind of touch on what you just said about an award doesn't exactly mean money, or fame doesn't mean money. I think it was the writer for The Bear, and I might be wrong on this, but he recently won an award, and at his time of accepting the award, when he stepped on stage, his bank account was in the negative. You know, he still hadn't been paid for the show.
Yeah.
He was getting this recognition, but he still couldn't go buy groceries.
Sure.
And The Bear is like pretty big. It's pretty popular, you know.
Hugely popular. If you don't know, your favorite actors and writers love The Bear, I promise. So if you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend it. But I do think like that's criminal.
Yeah.
There's no other way to phrase it other than that is some corrupt ass shit.
No, yeah, 100%. And I agree with you that there is a better understanding now of that than there was in the last strike, especially since a lot of fame is coming from like internet personalities and things like
Sure.
that now. We totally get it more now.
Yeah, in social media, we can hear directly from these people on the picket line, in their own words. We don't have to rely on
Extra or whatever.
Yeah, or
gossip show.
TM fucking Z. You know.
Yeah, but I also think something that is more popular now is studios kind of, and this might just be my conspiracy theory. I might be way off the mark here, but this is just what I believe.
I want to hear you.
That studios are really good now at weaponizing fans, especially fucking Disney. I saw a tweet today where someone was celebrating that that Dune 2 is supposed to, as long as it keeps its same release date, which is in the air right now,
Unlikely.
it will get like 11 weeks straight of IMAX screens, which means the Marvels isn't going to get any IMAX screens.
Yep, I saw that too.
And then some Disney fan like quote tweeted it and was like, I can't believe that we're going to let some Islamophobic or I forgot which side of like the religion it was on, like pro or anti.
Bro, just because they're in the desert doesn't.
I'm saying, bro.
What the fuck?
But they're like, I can't believe they're gonna let this screen over like such a, you know, beautiful thing about women empowerment and all that, which it was a very like Marvel heavy account. So people super like stan accounts and like super fandom has pushed the extreme so far where it is so easy for a studio to get a chokehold on someone and just their word is law. Anything else is just heresy.
Yeah, it is. And I think that takes us very squarely into talking about the strike that's ongoing today. I think it's just interesting, right? For us to be coming out of you know, a pandemic and an era where, I mean, anybody that I know has been complaining for a while about how we're not getting the same movies we used to, or we're not getting the movies we used to. And I know for a fact that a lot of the people that do work on nonstop Marvel movies, especially these studios that get hired for visual effects and stuff like that, are massively overworked. And I also know for a fact that I'm not the only one that has seen that the quality has gone downhill as a result of like this rapid pace of production that makes what was and could still be a very fun and engaging franchise turn into something that feels like the like fast food version of cinema. And so the result is that people have been paid less, and you know the real cause of that is the rise of the age of streaming.
Did you see the people on Twitter defending the Flash and saying, it's supposed to look bad. They made it look like ass on purpose to represent Shut up.
Yeah, it's not fucking
Shut up.
Sharkboy and
You're
Lava
just
Girl.
you're just excusing exploitation.
Yeah.
And I think it's no coincidence that the technical side of things, so like CGI artists and all that, the people who aren't unionized are the ones that are getting, just
Shafted.
beat to shit.
Yeah.
Because the actual like system of it is horrible. You get Disney or whatever huge company or studio to hire these independent CGI studios. And they say, okay, we want you to do this in X amount of time. Now, that could be like a whole movie in 3 months. That could be like a few scenes in 3 months or whatever. They don't really specify on a lot of things. And a lot of the times they ask for the most outlandish things. Like I think it was one of the Marvel movies. I don't remember which one.
Of course it
where
was.
3 months before release, they wanted the whole third act redone.
Oh my God.
And they pretty much say, well, if you can't meet this expectation, we're going to blacklist you and we're never going to use you again for any of our Disney movies. So there's just an absurd amount of studios that are blacklisted to never work on these major projects again because they couldn't meet an unreal expectation. So this is forcing people to work 18-hour days, 7 days a week to meet these expectations. And it's just, sorry you had a family, you don't anymore.
Yeah, I know. And what's mind-blowing to me is if like it should be, and I don't know why it's not being called out as being as illegal as it is for film studios to be banding together like this against some of these partners that they use for film creation. Because as soon as you're blacklisted, then others are going to blacklist you too. And because you couldn't meet these ridiculous demands, all of a sudden you're unable to work on anything, right? Anything that's not like an independent project where you're not going to be making even half the money. I mean, you weren't making enough money to begin with, and now you're in an even worse situation. And like, what just I don't know. There are many things about the situation that appall me, but like what stands out to me is that it's a losing game for everybody. Obviously the workers are heavily impacted by this, but like the work also suffers too.
Yeah, and we're also just straight up losing artists. People are just leaving the industry and finding new careers because what's being asked of them is so absurd. That's something that they could have been working as a CGI artist for like 20 years. But because of what's going on right now, they're forced for their own sanity and for their family's sake or whatever to find a new job.
And then these guilds stand together, united, demanding really what I think they should be asking for a lot more, quite frankly. But what is fairly minuscule. And I've got some numbers here, Andreas.
I knew you had numbers. I wanted to hear the numbers.
I'm a guy with numbers. That's what I do. And something that I think is interesting, put a little bit of perspective into what thousands of people are asking for. Well, okay, so let's start off here. The highest paid Hollywood executive in the last 5 years, was David Zaslav, Warner Bros. Discovery. And over the course of 5 years, he pulled in for himself nearly $500 million, $498 million.
You said that was for the year?
For over the course of 5 years.
Oh, 5 years. Okay, my bad.
So about $100 million a year is what he's paying himself. For perspective, the cost for Warner Bros., just their studio's side of things, for them to agree to what these unions are asking for, totals out to about $47 million a year, which is 0.108% of Warner Bros. Annual revenue. So if just the CEO cut his salary in half, hundreds of people would be able to make a living. Yeah, thousands of people would be able to make a living. Other fun stuff I got here. Reed Hastings over at Netflix, also Ted Sarandos over at Netflix, totaled over the last 5 years about combined together about 400 million.
Mm-hmm.
And for Netflix to be able to meet the demands of their workers would only cost 68 million, which is 0.2% of the revenue. If we want to get into, I mean, I can tell you, I don't even know how to calculate how much Jeff Bezos makes off of Amazon, right? But if we're going to Amazon and Amazon Prime as a part of the streaming thing too, that's only going to cost them 32 million because Amazon Prime is just significantly smaller than a lot of the other streaming services. And naturally, because Amazon is massive, that's 0.006% of their annual revenue for thousands of people to be able to live and eat. Just like the most outright, I'm gonna put actually in the description or like link it somewhere in this video, somewhere where you can see these numbers in real life, because I think it really puts into perspective how greedy these people are. And I understand also that, you know, I've seen people on like CNN or other stuff like that talking about how streaming services are losing money, and how there's too much competition out there and they're all kind of tugging each other away. And you're going to wind up probably seeing some consolidation amongst streaming services. But the reality is these CEOs are bullshitting us. You know, Bob Iger over at Disney is bullshitting when he says that strikers are being unreasonable and that like they cannot be placated, when the reality is you could take away a marginal percent of your salary for hundreds of people to be able to live and continue to do the thing that they love, right?
The thing is, he doesn't want them to live. He literally said he wants them to lose their homes.
Yeah. Ooh.
So
he doesn't want them to live. Let's transition to AI and how
yeah.
that's part of the conversation.
I actually, I have a little tidbit about how deep AI is running right now.
Okay.
So obviously everyone's like, oh my God, they want AI to write scripts. They're giving them, you know, typical, what's the word I'm looking for?
I love that word.
Yeah, they're giving them they're feeding them a bunch of scripts or different works or whatever, and saying, okay, these are your premises, whatever. We want something that's like this, or how like Secret Invasion is getting a lot of heat right now, as they should,
right?
For using AI to make their intro, and it looks like ass.
Yeah.
But this stuff is running so deep. So I work at a bank, right? I don't work in the industry at all.
Right.
I work at a bank, and a group asked me to film and put together like a welcome video for their like organization inside of the bank.
Sure.
And I was like, okay, cool, yeah. Could you just like let me know what we're shooting or whatever, so I can like map it out in my head, you know? And they send me the script. I read the script, very generic, no salt and pepper in there, bro, very bland.
Not even a little bit of paprika?
Not even. And they're like, hey, did you read the script? And I was like, yeah, I read it. And they were like, yeah, we used ChatGPT for it. Bro, at the bank.
Of course they did.
Which, granted, I mean, this video is being put together by people who have bank jobs.
Sure.
So then, you know, it's not in their job description to make these things.
They didn't never claim to be writers themselves. Fair.
But the speed at which this is spreading, absurd.
Yeah.
So you can, if you want to excuse it being used in a non-professional film space, I'm not gonna fight you too hard on that. I still disagree, but I'm not gonna fight you too hard.
That's not our battle.
But what's really concerning here is, like I said, the speed at which it's spreading, AI, ChatGPT, all that stuff, and that just shows to me how quickly jobs will be lost.
So I don't think it'll be a surprise to anybody. I'm pretty sure a lot of people have already heard this. You know, I don't think it'll be news necessarily to hear that. Well, studios have been wanting to essentially just take 3D scans of people, you know, which is something you can just do with your phone now. There's apps all over the place you can do this, in order to create models of people such that they can pay you for one day, like a fairly cheap rate, in order to use your likeness in deepfake or CGI, whatever form it wants to take in the future, in perpetuity forever. So they can make money off of your likeness without ever having to give you any contribution to that. And who knows what role that's going to take in the future, right? Like whether you like imagine one day, right, that you sign up for this and you think, well, I just need to be able to fucking eat today, right? So I'm going to do what I have to do to get through the day. And then 20 years from now, you see your face from 20 years ago winding up in a much more serious role than just some background character, right? And you just you don't get to do anything about it. Like sickening, because it's just another means of these studios being able to completely undermine and undercut people out of the business. You know, and you know, you may be coming from a finance or like a business side of things, and you think that's just smart business, like that's just like a way to be able to keep costs down. But the reality is, the only thing these studios have ever done is try to cut costs and hoard profits for themselves. And I don't think there's any way that you can stand by that while people are unable to live.
Yeah, it's just a very soulless feeling in general.
Yeah.
You're losing the soul of creatives.
Mm-hmm.
You're losing the soul of the film itself. I don't know. It's just assembly line ass filmmaking, bro. Yep. And that's all they want. They just want to churn it. Kind of getting the common theme that a lot of studios are very bad people. But if I'm not mistaken, there are a few that are not so bad that we have in mind that we want to talk about.
Yeah, actually, you know, I feel like you're going to have a little bit more information on this than I will, quite frankly. But there are some works going on through the strike right now that have well they've signed what is it, waivers, right, with these guilds in order to continue their work. Essentially, they've agreed to the terms, right, and they are not massive dickbags. So yeah. do you want to talk about some of those works?
Yeah, so a lot of these waivers are very small budget films. I'm talking a few million, you know, even less than $1 million, things that aren't being made by major studios. So they're not really in the forefront of what's being, you know, fought against right now. However, two studios that are still making films that didn't sign waivers, but are allowed to make films because they just agreed to what was being asked.
Right.
They just signed the new deals. So this is a forever thing for them.
Yeah, it turns out it can be that easy.
It can be that easy. You
right.
know? Are A24 and Neon. Now, with Neon specifically, if we look at their recent filmography, the last 3 Palme d'Or winners at Cannes have all been Neon films. I forgot what one this year, but last year Triangle of Sadness won. Year before that, Titan. So Palme d'Or is the biggest award you can get at a film festival.
Right.
The people responsible for those films, and a lot of times they just buy the rights to the film and they distribute it. But the people who are wanting to encourage those types of films are the first ones signing more rights and more money or whatever you want to say to the filmmakers. It's not a coincidence, you know?
Right.
And the other studio that's really big on that, A24, also similarly is famous for giving filmmakers more of a voice. I mean, I don't know if you watched Beau is Afraid.
I actually have not yet, and it's on my to watch list.
So Beau is Afraid is a 3-hour therapy session, which is cool that a filmmaker can do it. Say whatever you want about the movie, whether you liked it or not. I enjoyed it, but I'm not going to dive into that. It's no coincidence that a studio that would allow that kind of film to be made is also, you know, right behind the people making the films.
Sure.
And, you know, giving them what they want, encouraging more art, encouraging more work. And then there's a few films that they're making right now specifically that we want to be on the lookout for. I don't remember their titles though.
Yeah, well, I know that one of them, and I could be just a massive, stupid dummy head, but I'm pretty sure it's called Death of a Unicorn. Yeah. And it's going to have Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega. And I'll be honest, I don't know a ton of it about what the movie's going to be about, but I know that I love when Paul Rudd plays himself. And I'm excited to see what else Jenna Ortega can do. And I generally am very excited about A24 movies just because they do allow that creative expression, right? Whether it's a movie I love or not, I like seeing something done differently. And so I'm excited to be on the lookout for that personally. So I know that also another thing that's going on is Anne Hathaway is going to be coming out with or is working with A24 on a movie called Mother Mary, which should be coming out roughly next year. We'll see, but there's not a ton of information on it just yet. But I'm excited to go see it. I'm excited to check it out, and more than anything, I'm just excited that there are studios that are still willing to work with not only these unions, but also just be a little bit more understanding about the fact that these people need to be able to live. You know, in order to have this creative expression, you need the money behind it. So if can't be creative if you can't eat, right? So I think that's really cool, and I'm excited to be checking it out. But certainly those couple of movies and studios are a little bit of the exception, which is why they're the only ones that we're talking about.
Yeah, and a lot of studios are honestly trying to encourage some pretty bad behavior, convincing people to cross the picket line, to scab or whatever. Fun fact, you know who's believed to be scabbing right now?
Who?
Taylor Swift. It's believed that she is working on some kind of project, writing something. I don't know. I vaguely read about this. I might be way off the mark on this, but I heard.
Okay. Yeah, word around the grapevine is. Okay.
But there's a good amount of things we're not allowed to do. Even us as people who aren't working on films, we're not in the guild or the unions or whatever. Things that we shouldn't do to help out with this. First and foremost, with podcasts, if you're a podcaster or aspirations of podcasting or anything like you and I, Alex.
Hey, yeah, like us. These guys.
The big thing that people are pushing is to not talk about films that are scabbing or like against the strike. Right. So just completely ignoring those. Even productions that are about to be released, we're not supposed to really cover too much. Something that I thought was interesting was if you're an actor or a writer, or if you're an actor, you are not allowed to cosplay at like a Comic-Con type event as like your character or like whatever thing. That's against the rules. Obviously, just crossing the picket line and writing something or just cooperating with the studios in any manner at all right now is a big no-no.
So just by and large, anything that promotes or gives money to studios that are not giving their money to their workers, general rule of thumb, that's a no-go. And that's one of the ways that you can stand in solidarity. If you want to be a little bit more active, there are a couple of things that you can do. For instance, I know that SAG-AFTRA has asked people to pledge their solidarity, which is something that you can do online fairly easily. I know that also the WGA has asked people to sign a letter of support for the guild's contract negotiation. So these are just things that you can just sign online. Don't necessarily cost money, but you can also donate to some of these funds as well. And I'm going to be linking some of those resources down in the description below and kind of sharing them on social media as well, because while these people are striking for better wages, you have to understand that they're coming out of a situation with terrible wages into a strike where they receive no wages. So, you know, any way that we can offer a little bit of support, either vocally, sharing the message, sharing sentiment, or, you know, if you are that person that wants to offer a little bit of money to go towards just like, you know, waters while they're out there picketing. And quite frankly, the worst heat wave I've ever experienced in my life. And they're in California. Like, we were not even getting into that, like how terrible of an experience is to strike. And I think that's something else that is worth mentioning, that they're not enjoying themselves out there on the picket line. This is truly something that they're doing for the sake of not only themselves, but each other. It's a community thing. And so, just to say, there are ways to share support. And certainly I think one of the best ways that you can do that, and the easiest way that we can all get down with, is just having a little bit of sense of solidarity and understanding and trying to educate ourselves on what these people go through to create the things that we love, right?
No, yeah, I think that's a great bow to wrap up the gift that is this podcast. Unfortunately, we are out of time. So, like Alex said, if you do want to help, if you're a good human being, we're going to link a lot of stuff to donate to or just make you aware of anything.
And I really appreciate those of you that have tuned in. This is our first inaugural and annual weekly podcast, and so I'm really excited to keep this stuff going. Certainly not every episode is going to be about something necessarily this serious. Our goal here is to cover a vast spans of just what we experience as movie lovers, diving deeper into the stuff that we find interesting, and it's going to be a little something different every week. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
You promised them every week.
Well,
now we have to be every week.
I also promised annual, but anyways, cheers to that.
Cheers to that.